From the News Channel 5 Network, this is MorningLine with Nick Barris.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on Morning Line. Nick Barris here with you on a wet and rainy Tuesday. Hopefully things will slow down a bit later today. They say Wednesday, one more day of rain. Just handle it. Handle it. It sucks. Don't go outside. Just join us here on the show. This morning, as we do once a month, every, month, we do this, and we've been doing this for years. Started with Tim Takacs and Barbara McGinnis. This morning, Chris Johnson's going to be with us as we talk about elder law. And I remember, Chris, when Tim first came on this, I'm like, elder law, I mean, it's law, it's legal, it's all of this. And I wasn't aware, especially as the baby boomers start aging to the point where now that there's such a large population of them, that this was going to be such a booming part of the legal practice. And Tim saw this early on, didn't he?
He really did. He really did. It takes a vision to have the foresight to see this coming down the pipe. Yes. It really does.
He decided to specialize. He starts his own practice here in town, and you are one of the more recent members of the practice. You've been there now more than a year. You've been on this show before, and I think you're terrific.
Thanks,
you help so many people. If you would, just kind of lay it out for the folks again, what the realm of elder law covers,
so they
know what to call.
That's right. Yeah. Elder law has a big realm, and it starts with your basic estate planning documents. You want to have your wills, your powers of attorney at a bare minimum, some trust planning if you're looking for probate avoidance, but then it grows from there. We look at asset protection, and then we look at TennCare planning, Medicaid planning, VA planning, making sure that people are set for their future. We call it their personal, legal, and financial care needs over time. Mm-hmm. That's what we're worried about. We want to forward look and ensure we're projecting out to make sure they are covered for the rest of their lives.
Now, does that mean you typically will work with the seniors as they get there, or do you oftentimes work with their children who maybe are saying, look, we need to help mom and dad get going on this?
It's a healthy mix of both, Nick.
Okay.
And so we have children that bring their parents, and sometimes we have the parents, and we have 80, 85-year-olds. They come in and they're still spry, and they're like, hey, we just realized we should get this taken care of, and that's fantastic. Sometimes the situation's a little more emergent, and the children come in and say, mom or dad has moved into a skilled nursing facility. We're concerned they may not move out, and the costs are getting very frightening. And we walk through and we give them some peace of mind as we show them the path that is going to keep them fiscally solvent through all
Yeah, I'll tell you what, and that's a key. I was even talking to you, my folks are going through something like that to a degree. They've been in an assisted living facility. It's Medicaid qualified. Some are Medicaid qualified, some are not, correct? And they've been paying for their care in this facility. At some point, they're going to run through their savings if they continue to live, which I sure hope they do.
Right.
And then all they'll have left is their entitlements, which is Social Security. And I was asking him before this, okay, if you have a loved one in an assisted living facility that happens to be, Medicaid qualified, they've been paying into this all this time. There's only a certain number of rooms for this, but because they've been in there, I think they give preference. If you're already there, as opposed to being on the outside waiting to come in, my understanding, you can tell me if I'm wrong or not, is that you've got a better shot at that. They've put $250,000 in this place. When they run out, they better deal with them.
That's right.
Okay? Or they're going to hear from my lawyers. But, all right, at what point when you recognize, all right, I look at my folks' assets, and they probably have enough to cover for this assisted living facility for another 2 years. When do you go to the point, and what is the process? And I know it may vary from state to state. They happen to live in Boise, Idaho, and Tim's put me in touch with some lawyers there that I have to get hooked up with. But when do they start applying to get set to say, look, we're going to run out of money. We're hoping then to be Medicaid qualified. When do you start doing that?
Well, I think the answer is right away, and it does vary from state to state, and so you want to be careful. If you're talking about a Medicaid plan, the first thing you want to look at is make sure they're medically qualified.
What does that mean?
So there's a test called a PAE, and you have to score a 9 on it, and it's essentially a medical examination where they look at your ability to do certain tasks. Can you feed yourself? Can you ambulate safely? All these things. Can you transfer? And they look at these different things that a lot of them are activities of daily living that they want to see what you can do and what you can't do. And if you score high enough, you are medically qualified. So there's such a thing as being too healthy for Medicaid as far as that goes. And then they're going to look at the financial aspect of it.
So, okay, and that's the part. I mean, the financial seems clear. When you're out of money, you're out of money, except for your Social Security. You can't have a house. You can't have other assets.
Well, you can have a house. So a house is an exempt asset. A house is not countable against you. Now, in TennCare, we have something interesting that's called estate recovery. So you can own your home, because it's not really palatable that we force, mom and dad to move out of their house or sell their home. No one likes that result. So the state has found a balancing interest, whether or not you agree with it. What they determined was you can be on TennCare and own your home. However, when you pass away, they have an ugly little duckling called estate recovery, and when that house is sold, the state will be asked to be paid back first.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I'm glad you clarified that. And that's, for people to know. Yeah, but you know what? That's understandable. You're getting a benefit. The taxpayer basically has to be repaid.
It is. Now, at the same token, prudent planning can prevent that from happening. There's a 5-year look back, and there's some wise planning that can be done, and take that home, place it in a trust, and you can avoid that kind of ugly result.
Which is where you guys come in.
That's where we come in.
As far as the PAE test, so if you're to the point where, now, for instance, say my mom's been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, would that be something in a...
It's not, there's no diagnosis that's what I would call determinative. There are a couple of things that matter more than others, but they're gonna look at everything and make a determination. Now, Alzheimer's and dementia patients, obviously you have a safety concern with them. They need a 24-hour secure environment, depending on the level of progression.
Right.
And so sometimes you can appeal if you're a point or two short and say we need a safety determination because they are not
But if
safe to be on their own.
if the parents, and my folks are still doing okay, they're living in an assisted facility with in kind of an apartment there, but I mean the meals are provided and they have nurses and they're given special medicines, that's taken care of. But if you were to sit next to either one of them right now at this table, I mean, you'd say, well, you could have a conversation with them,
right.
And they get by. So they could be too healthy to qualify for Medicaid?
Initially, yes. Now,
even if they're out of money. I mean, I don't get that.
Well, and so you're going to look at, in Tennessee we have home and community-based services, and so you will look at different things, but they are going to look at a health qualification, and so you want to. That's why I say, when you ask me when is the time to plan, the time to plan is now.
But their health could deteriorate.
Their
if
health
it's 2
could
years,
deteriorate, and you don't want their finances to run out, and so you can look at structuring their finances and taking advantage of every resource that's out there available. So you look at VA, you look at what things for instance here, look what TennCare possibilities are out there, but you have to really marry up this situation. The goal is not to get to the point where you are out of money. Okay,
good. Well, we'll talk more maybe after the show. I got to get some contacts from Boise. But let me ask you this then. So we'll open up the phone line, 737-7587. What would you say some of the most common questions are that your clients bring up? I know many people come to you maybe to help with the estate, wills, and things like this. What's maybe and some people do those themselves. Tim used to say, he always talked about how, he remembers seeing the will on a napkin where he said, all to ma. That's his favorite thing. Have you ever told you that one?
Yes,
all to ma.
he has.
And I'm like, well, if it's written, I guess that can stand up. But in terms of really specifying in a will and getting something like that set up, and a lot of people I talk to haven't even done wills yet.
Right. Well, so people will come in. I think one of the big questions is my will enough? I get document reviews all the time. You'll take a look at the will and see if it passes muster. And unfortunately, a lot of times people will these days just go to the internet and download a form and not understand that there are certain criteria that have to be met, and they fail to do it. They think, well, I wrote my own will, but they typed it up. And if you want to have your own handwritten will, holographic will, it needs to be handwritten, needs to be signed, needs to be dated, and they miss these little things, these little nuances. And then what they're doing is, even if, let's say, they do find a decent one that passes muster, it doesn't do all it could or all it should for them. And so when you're getting through in the appropriate planning, yes, they have a will, okay, we've gotten after death taken care of, but they didn't do any powers of attorney. If they become incapacitated, now there's no one there to take care of them. And now what is the simplest of all estate planning documents, really the power of attorney, it avoids a conservatorship. It makes sure that their health care desires are put forward and represented, and they don't get these things done, and that's what impacts their life. And that's the really sad part, is they miss those documents. And then with trusts, it's the same problem every time. People will get a trust and they don't end up taking care of the funding. A trust is like a big bucket. It's an empty bucket, and it only holds what you put in it. And oftentimes people purchase the trust, go home, they have a little letter from the attorney that they don't read, and it tells them, hey, here's what you're supposed to do, and the follow through never happens.
Yep.
And so we emphasize that you're not done until we get this thing funded.
All right, we're going to take a break on that note. That's great advice. When we come back, we can take some phone calls, 737-7587. Questions about, as we just talked about, wills, trusts. If you want to look into the idea of reverse mortgages, sometimes we get calls along those lines. And as he said at the beginning of this show, he's got insight into a lot of the situation with the VA, which, boy, navigating that sometimes can be a pickle. But there's all types of different benefits coming up just of late. And I don't know if this falls into your realm. We did a news story here about how the VA, and there may be some lawsuits being filed for the servicemen and women that were exposed to Agent Orange, and now with regard to maybe some of the problems that's caused their children,
right,
and how that comes into play. So we'll take a break. When we come back, more of our conversation with our guests as we talk about elder law, and take your calls right after this. Stay with us.